There is such a thing as being too late when it comes to climate change.
A stern warning from Barack Obama. The US president's unveiled a ramped-up plan to slash carbon emissions from power plants to stop what he calls the greatest threat facing the world. But are his goals realistic when jobs and money are on the line? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The US president says that time is running out for action on climate change. Barack Obama says the world may no longer be able to reverse global warming unless aggressive action is taken now. His new plan is all about cutting power plant emissions and boosting renewable energy. The president says the US has 15 years to cut carbon emissions to 32% below what they were 10 years ago. Each state would design its own plan to meet specific carbon emission targets. States which act sooner will be rewarded. The president has compared the environmental benefits of the equivalent of taking almost 70% of US cars off the roads. And the White House says that these cuts will prevent around 3,600 premature deaths every year. But environmentalists say the plan is too vague and that there's no concrete starting date. As Patty Culhane reports, coal industry workers are outraged. They say the initiative will cut too many jobs and drive up the cost of electricity.
No challenge poses a greater threat to our future.
An impassioned speech, part science lesson, part pep talk. U.S. President Barack Obama trying to convince the skeptical climate change is real while trying to rally the country that they can change it.
We can solve this thing, but we have to get going.
His warning, the current drought, floods, and long wildfire season, it's all going to get worse unless the rules change, and that is exactly what he's doing. The plan calls for coal-fired power plants like this one to reduce carbon emissions by nearly a third in just 15 years. Critics say that'll mean many more plants will be like this one, shut down. Republicans say there'll be negative consequences for the economy.
They threaten to ship good middle-class jobs overseas. They're likely to make it harder to maintain reliable sources of energy to meet demand.
The White House disputes those claims, and they are hoping that this new plan will push other countries to take similar steps as part of a UN climate pact.
If we don't do it, nobody will. The only reason that China is now looking at getting serious about its emissions because they saw that we were going to do it too. When the world faces its toughest challenges, America leads the way forward. That's what this plan is about.
But experts say it could take years before the new rules are actually implemented, if at all.
There's some people who believe that another Supreme Court case is in the offing here because there are fundamental disagreements about the way that the underlying law was written that may need to get tested at sort of, the highest level of the court system.
Most cases take 4 to 5 years to reach the Supreme Court.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
Meaning if the president sees this as a key part of his legacy, he likely won't know if it is until long after he's out of office. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, climate change has been especially high on the global agenda since 2009. That's when Copenhagen hosted the first global summit to address global warming. There, world leaders failed to set concrete goals for emission reduction. And it's been a similar story at several climate change summits since, and global statistics remain high. China, for instance, continues to emit the most carbon dioxide, 11 billion tons, accounting for almost 30% of global emissions. The US comes next with almost 20% of the world's CO2 emissions, and India is responsible for just under 10% of the global tally. But emissions there are expected to double within the next 15 years. Lots here for us to talk about on today's programme. Let's bring in our guests. From Geneva, we're joined by David Elzinga, Economic Affairs Officer for the Sustainable Energy Division at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. From Beijing, Pen Peng, Director of Policy Research for the Chinese Renewable Energy Industries Association. And in New York, Jochen Vermuth, Chief Investment Officer and founder of Vermuth Asset Management, which invests in companies which have a positive impact on the environment. Welcome to you all. David Elzinga, we'll start with you first. What do you make of President Obama's plans? Are they realistic?
I think that, as he stated, this is a starting point. He set the time frame to 2030, and that is when a lot of work needs to be done, but it also has to continue much longer. And as mentioned, this has a real focus on renewables, but also part of that, there is the ability to have action with the use of fossil fuels so that they can be part of a sustainable energy system.
As we heard in the report a few moments ago, a lot of people in the States are not happy with the president right now. It seems that the greatest obstacle to tackling climate change properly perhaps is capitalism, our market-driven economies. Would that be a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is going to be some barriers there, and I think it's up to governments such as the United States, but also around the world, to really set up the right policy frameworks to allow capitalism to be used as a tool, not as a barrier to develop a sustainable energy system.
All right, let's bring in Pen Peng then in Beijing. President Obama mentioned China there and said that China is only doing something about its own climate, its own CO2 emissions because of the pressure that's put on it by other nations. What is China doing right now to move towards more sustainable energy sources? How seriously, given that it remains one of the world's biggest polluters, does China take the issue of climate change?
I think China is not only facing climate change problem, also facing the air pollution problem. Everyone already have seen this. You know, from the last year, the Office of State Council announced China strategic action plan for energy development from 2014 to 2020. So by 2020, China hope we can control the energy consumption. If we calculate that by standard coal, that would be 4.8 billion tons for 2020. So if we see the number of last year to 2014, the number is 4.62 billion tons. So I think that figure is pretty good. So at that time, in 2020, we will have more than 200 gigawatt wind capacity and more than 100 gigawatt PV solar capacity. At that time, so the non-fossil energy share will be reached as 15%, I think. That is quite an ambitious goal.
Okay, let's bring in Jochen then, Vermouth in New York. Jochen, first of all, let's set out a stall here. You believe that what we're witnessing right now is the third phase of the Industrial Revolution. Is that right?
Yes, actually I am from Germany, happen to be on vacation here in New York. And in Germany, of course, we are already at 50% renewables, even 75% renewable power in the summer months. But what's relevant in New York is that in New York in 1893, the first Dow index would have had only 10 steam engine railway companies and only horses on the roads of New York. Just 10 years later, you have no steam engine companies, railway companies in the Dow index, and you have cars only. The United Kingdom used to be the leading power in the steam-powered revolution. America became the global leader in the oil and gas-powered revolution. We're now moving to the renewable power revolution. We are creating the new Rockefellers, the new JP Morgans, and if America continues to drag its feet, then we're very happy to take the lead, and America will disappear from the global stage just like China disappeared for centuries. Because it will be betting on old technologies.
All right,
There's been already a revolution. Germany financed.
So what you're saying is that when you look at what Germany's achieving right now, President Obama's targets look pretty unambitious at the moment.
Well, in Germany we have a plan now that we could by 2020 reach 100% renewable power. To increase the minuscule American 5% renewable power to by 30% is almost nothing. But I think it's good to be moving in the right direction. I believe in the power of free markets, and amazing news have happened. In Dubai, power is being offered at 6 cents per kilowatt hour from solar. In Austin, Texas, at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Oil would have to fall to $7 a barrel to compete, which means all of the oil, gas, coal assets now on the ground will have to be written off because competitive renewable power will simply drive them out of the market. With increased energy efficiency, the world will change. Germany consumes 1/4 the energy per unit of GDP than many emerging markets. If we apply German technologies globally, the demand for fossil fuels will collapse and the prices for fossil fuels will collapse. We're facing a global crash. $21 trillion of fossil fuel assets will have to be written off. That's horrible news for those people working in that sector, but it's wonderful news for everybody else. As in any structural revolution, there'll be great winners, the new Rockefellers, the new JP Morgans of the world, and there will be losers. And it's a great time to be an investor because you can make lots of money and we can do the right thing for our children and grandchildren to have a future.
Okay, I know David Elzinga wants to come back on that. David, what do you make of what you've just heard?
Well, what I'm kind of wondering is under what time frame? Because when we look at some of the analysis by the International Energy Agency, even under their 2-degree scenario, which aligns with global climate goals, they see that fossil fuels remain at about 45% of the global energy mix by 2050, down from 80% today. So in part, I agree that there is a very significant shift happening. And I'm highly supportive and excited to see renewables develop as they come. But this does not preclude the use of fossil fuels in sustainable energy systems. And I think this is very important for developing countries and emerging economies that have these resources that are indigenous, low cost, and there's available technology today that can allow them to use it to develop. So I guess I'm just a little bit less bullish to see the shift happening under, say, the 2050 timeframe. Maybe by the 2100 timeframe, I can foresee a 100% renewable energy system. But we still see a role for fossil fuels happening in the near and definitely medium term.
All right, let's get Jochen's opinion on that. I'll come back to Peng in Beijing in just a moment. But can we, do you think, if we set our minds to it, power the world just from renewable energy sources, or is there still room for fossil fuel sources of energy? I mean, renewables are just so expensive at the moment. You look at developing nations, for instance, they simply can't afford to invest in the kind of technology that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest misunderstandings or the result of fossil fuel propaganda. Just as tobacco told you it's good to smoke, don't buy that stuff anymore. Please don't say again that fossil fuels are cheaper than renewable energy. True, in 2000 it cost 600 cents per kilowatt hour to produce power from solar. Today we're at 4 cents. That is in Austin, Texas. That is, we're cheaper than gas from shale gas. We're cheaper than oil. Only if oil were to fall to $7 a barrel, not $77 a barrel, could it compete. Coal is still cheap, relatively speaking, but the breakthrough will come. So first of all, the breakthrough has happened already. The cheapest way for someone in the Middle East, someone in Africa, someone in India or China to get power on the roof today is solar. Same true in Germany today already. So they will leapfrog the development in the fossil fuel area. I'm not saying you should shut down all of the existing fossil fuel capacity, but I think you should definitely stop all further investment in fossil fuel exploration that's based on the assumption of $70, $80 a barrel oil. That's just something of the past. The current drop in oil prices is not cyclical. It's a long-term downward trend, which will mean that all of the further investments are useless economically. Capital markets, free market capitalism will drive out any new investments in fossil fuels, and we have the old fuel lobby trying to keep investments going there, but it's useless. So yes, there will be old gas power plants that will be useful as backup capacity, but they will be replaced over time by biofuel and other backup capacity. Wind, solar and storage capacity are all becoming much, much cheaper. As I said, solar already is through grid parity. It's cheaper to use solar in emerging markets on grid and in Germany on grid already. So it's no longer expensive. It's a misunderstanding.
Okay.
It used to be expensive. It's no longer the case. The world is changing.
All right, let's bring in Peng then in Beijing. Peng, I just want to get your thoughts on what we've heard in the last few minutes and also about what China is doing to produce energy from alternative sources at the moment, solar, wind and bio?
Yes, actually, if we just compare with the current price, we can see the fossil fuel energy is more cheaper. But actually, why is it cheaper? Because we didn't calculate the environmental cost, like air pollution and water pollution. Just put that into the real cost. So I think in China, just as David mentioned, the solar and wind, the cost is dramatically dropped in the last few years. So I think in the future, the cost can be equal to the thermal fair power price, exactly for wind at 2020 in China. In this in the national action plan, and we expect the wind price it will be equal to fair power price at that time, and because now that's only very small difference between fair power and wind in the coastline in China. I mean the eastern area, because in this area the electric market is very active, so they have very much demand for electricity. So the price is pretty good. And in China, how can we just to encourage developers to invest renewable energy is we have a feed-in tariff policy. That policy can guarantee 20 years. I mean 20 years for the generation from renewable energy. That means the state grid will purchase renewable energy electricity firstly and pay that at the fixed price. So that is a very good policy to help developers calculate how much I should to invest and how much I can earn.
David Peng raises an interesting point there about the environmental cost of using, in particular, fossil fuels. You were talking about there being this lag, that there's still room, you were talking about, for the use of fossil fuels. How do you do that cleanly? How do you use fossil fuels without damaging the environment?
Well, from the first perspective, you have to take a look at efficiency and use best-in-class technologies to increase the efficiency as much as possible. Then the main technology, especially in the electricity sector, is carbon capture and storage. And that's when effectively you're capturing 90% of the CO2 emissions and storing them underground permanently so that the emissions from the plant are significantly reduced by 90%. And this technology is also developing as our renewable technologies today coming down in cost and moving forward. So this is one of the key technologies in the power sector for fossil fuels.
But that sounds expensive to me. You've got to invest in that kind of technology, haven't you? I know governments have to encourage businesses to move to more sustainable models of business. But given that those businesses ultimately have a responsibility to their shareholders and people who work for those businesses, how can they be encouraged to invest in that kind of expensive technology?
Well, right now, when you look at the range of technologies for electricity production, of course, we've talked about renewable, solar, and wind. And when you look at those, they produce electricity cleanly, but in a variable fashion. That means when the sun's not shining, the solar panels aren't producing power. Of course, storage technology is coming, but it's not there today to the level that can support the entire system. So on the other side of that, you need baseload production or dispatchable energy. Electricity you can produce, turn on and off when you need it. Included under those are nuclear power, concentrating solar power with thermal storage, and say fossil fuel power. When you put CCS and you rank it against nuclear, concentrating solar power, and CCS, when you put them all together, you find that these technologies are actually very comparable when you look at the learning curves in the next few years. So again, I think that we have to make sure that we look at all possible production in the energy system, and we see where it best fits. many of the prices that our earlier speaker was mentioning are extremely sunny locations. And there are many of those locations around the world. But, I can point to India as an example, who had a concentrating solar power program that didn't work well because the solar irradiation wasn't strong enough to make it work. And that project was a failure. So we have to be very careful with being so bullish that one technology or one type of technology that can provide the solution for everything. We have to look at it in a systems approach and choose the best technologies that can work in a range of different scenarios.
Jochen, what do you make of that? David's got a point there, hasn't he?
Not really, I don't think. So I live in Berlin, and we're now at 9 cents kilowatt hour in Berlin from solar. If I add a Mercedes-Benz battery in my basement, I come to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, so I'm at 22 cents from the grid. So with a battery, fully independent, I'm already set and done. So that's, I think, difficult for people to capture, that we've broken through grid parity. I know it's very hard to understand, but that's what happened. And when you break through grid parity, it's like a dam is breaking. There's no hope for nuclear, which requires huge subsidies, or coal, which is very polluting all over the place, needs very expensive carbon capture. I think we have a fantastic opportunity here. Also, by the way, one of our portfolio companies delivers electric battery management of your car. So you put a car next to your house, that car is a battery, that battery can provide the storage capacity the system needs. If you have a swarm of cars, 95% of the time the car stands around, isn't driven. And when you have an old electric car battery, you can hang it on the roof of your garage and you're done. We also have large pools of these batteries now stacked in the basements of large football stadiums or elsewhere, providing industrial scale storage facilities. And therefore, what used to be the problem to the system is no longer a problem. Certainly, there are times when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow, but there are times when you have storage facilities. It's good to have gas as a bridging power to provide capacity in between, but I think we have the opportunity now to really change the system, and the great winners, which we like to invest in, and the great losers, which I'm afraid is the fossil fuel industry.
David, President Obama's plans were highly controversial even before they were published, with several states threatening to sue. Will the president's plans, as some states argue, make the US uncompetitive, bearing in mind what Jochen was saying earlier on, in that you've got to get with this right now, otherwise you're going to be left behind?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I look at this climate change from a global perspective, and the one thing that we don't know is what is the cost of inaction. And President Obama talked about floods and droughts and things like that. We are seeing these play out. So what I think is clear here is that President Obama is trying to show some leadership as a country, and I'm incredibly supportive about that. And I hope what that'll do is create action around the world. Climate change is not something that one country can address. If only U.S. takes action, or even only U.S. and China, that's enough. We have to do this in a global way, and it is so important that countries like the U.S., like China, like Europe, are taking these actions, and hopefully that'll bring the others to follow.
David, I need a very brief answer from you here. Is it still possible to avert the climate change that scientists have predicted, or have we missed that moment, the tipping point, if you like?
I would say it's not too late. We have to start taking action, and it's going to cost more the longer we wait.
Great. There, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it. Thank you to all of you. Time is against us. David Eltinger in Geneva, Peng Peng in Beijing, and in New York, Jochen Vermuth. And thank you, as always, for watching. We're always keen to hear from you. Please do get in touch via our programme page at aljazeera.com if you want to feed back your thoughts on our discussion here on the President's plans and climate change in general, or about what any of our guests were saying today. You can post your comments as well at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or you could tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.